In April 1978, Afghanistan's political landscape was shaken by a coup. Nur Mohammad Taraki, a communist leader, seized power from President Mohammad Daoud Khan. This marked a turning point in Afghan history. The country was now under communist rule, a change met with resistance from many Afghans. The April 1978 coup wasn't the end of the instability. The government, led by Taraki, faced internal divisions and power struggles. This led to a series of coups within the government itself. The country was in turmoil. The Soviet Union, watching closely, saw an opportunity to expand its influence. They had already been providing support to the Afghan communists. As the situation deteriorated, the Soviets saw a chance to install a stable, pro-Soviet regime in Kabul. Faced with growing unrest and a strengthening anti-communist insurgency, the Afghan government repeatedly called on the Soviet Union for assistance. They needed help to stay in power. The Soviets, weighing their options, saw an opportunity to intervene in a strategically important region. The Soviet Union's decision to invade Afghanistan wasn't taken lightly. It was a calculated move driven by a complex web of motivations. At the forefront was the desire to prop up the faltering Afghan communist government. The Soviets had invested heavily in the regime and couldn't afford to see it collapse. Beyond propping up a friendly government, the Soviets had security concerns of their own. They were worried about the spread of Islamic extremism from neighboring Iran and the potential for Western influence to take root in Afghanistan. An unstable Afghanistan, right on their southern border, was deemed a threat to Soviet security. Geopolitical ambitions also played a significant role. The Soviets saw Afghanistan as a pawn in the larger Cold War chessboard. By intervening, they could gain a strategic foothold in Southwest Asia, potentially threatening US interests in the region. This move was also seen as a way to contain the Islamic Revolution in Iran, which had overthrown a pro-Western monarchy just a year earlier. The Soviet Union felt it had a duty to protect socialist regimes around the world. The so-called Brezhnev Doctrine provided justification for intervening in other countries to safeguard socialist rule. Afghanistan, in the eyes of the Soviet leadership, presented a prime opportunity to uphold this doctrine. On December 24, 1979, the Soviet Union launched its invasion of Afghanistan. Soviet troops crossed the border and entered the country, marking the beginning of a long and bloody conflict. The invasion was swift and decisive. Soviet forces quickly took control of key cities and strategic locations. One of the most significant events of the invasion was Operation Storm, carried out on December 27, 1979. Soviet special forces stormed the presidential palace in Kabul, killing Afghan President Hafizullah Amin, who had come to power in a bloody coup just months earlier. Amin was replaced with Babrak Karmal, a more pliable leader favored by the Soviets. The invasion of Afghanistan and the subsequent occupation dragged on for nearly a decade. Soviet forces found themselves bogged down in a guerrilla war against the Mujahideen, Afghan resistance fighters supported by the United States, Pakistan, and other countries. The war in Afghanistan became the Soviet Union's Vietnam. Despite their superior firepower, Soviet troops struggled to defeat the Mujahideen, who were fighting on their home turf and had the backing of powerful international allies. The Soviet invasion of Afghanistan had profound consequences that continue to shape the geopolitical landscape today. For Afghanistan, the invasion was catastrophic. The country was plunged into a brutal war that destroyed its infrastructure, shattered its economy, and killed an estimated 1 to 3 million people. Millions more were displaced, seeking refuge in neighboring countries. The Soviet Union too suffered from its Afghan misadventure. The war drained the Soviet economy, undermined its international standing, and fueled dissent within its own borders. The conflict exposed the limitations of Soviet military power and contributed to the erosion of morale within the Soviet army. The invasion also had far-reaching global consequences. It exacerbated Cold War tensions, leading to a renewed arms race and heightened mistrust between the superpowers. The conflict also created a breeding ground for extremism, as foreign fighters flocked to Afghanistan to fight the Soviets, laying the groundwork for the rise of groups like Al-Qaeda. The legacy of the Soviet invasion is still felt today. Afghanistan continues to grapple with the aftermath of war, struggling to rebuild and achieve stability. Russia, the successor state to the Soviet Union, remains wary of instability in Afghanistan and is keen to prevent the country from becoming a haven for terrorists.